Thank you, Baruch. Thank you, West, for having me and for allowing me to be part of this amazing symposium on amazing poet, philosopher, thinker. It was not my doctorate, it was my master's, and during my bachelor's, I don't want to lie to you guys. Although I did 4 years over my master's throughout the whole Netherlands and picked my only the courses that I really like to focus on things like decoloniality, Glissant, and Fanon. So at least by years number, it was somewhat of a doctorate. But I don't carry the title. So my name is Lev Avitan. I'm a spoken word artist. I perform almost always mostly in Dutch. I thought, will I go for a doctorate? Will I do more in academia? But then, as a spoken word artist, I was asked to also bring my philosophy in. It was welcomed, and then I did more of that, and I really enjoyed that. So next to spoken word, where I write poetry also about, like directly about society, my lived experience in this society, there is also more layers of philosophy that I've integrated. Now I usually also give what I call philo-poetic lectures, which means I give a lecture for like a half an hour, but I use poetic devices such as rhyme, rhythm, and other hopefully beautiful imagery. I tried to do that for today, but somehow in English it just didn't come together. I thought, will I do it in Dutch? Like, no, because I did give some of my opacity away that way, because I want to be legible for you guys and gals and everybody in between and around. But I consented to that opacity. And that's the other part. I demand the right to opacity, and when I do not, I consent to not be opaque and be legible for where I can. So I composed a set of poems. It will take around 20 minutes, and they will take you through my reading of Glissant. Because throughout when I started philosophy, right, 8 years ago, 4 of which were the masters, I never had that obsession with one singular philosopher. It was always what are you saying and how does that relate to how I experience the world, or how does it open new parts of the world for me which I didn't experience or sense before. And so philosophy was always struggling with philosophers and saying, okay, I like this, I dislike this. And so I'm not here to idolize Glissant. I think especially him would hate that, especially when you invoke the poetic and poetry in your philosophy, you would hate to be idolized. So I will share with you everything that I find beautiful and meaningful, and here and there some critiques. My first point is that I respect and I love that his thought is a non-system of thought. It doesn't try to be a system and systematize and make into strict logic and to reduce into things you can account for and do mathematics with. That's not what he's aiming for. And still, I try to look for some logic within his system. Maybe because my brain just works like that, and that's also a part of human diversity, that some people just like a bit more concreteness. So also my poetry is not very abstract poetry. I like poetry where people can immediately recognize themselves or their world, and where I recognize myself and my world. And for me, poetry and the poetic, and the book that opened my world to Glissant was Poetics of Relation. From poetics, I gathered a method, the poetic method, which I've called in some papers. And for me, the poetic method is not just to write poetic philosophy. For me, the poetic method is not an infiltration, but interveniatie, hoe zeg je? Interveniation, is that English? Intervention into the imaginaries. Thank you. This is a collective effort. Thank you, everybody. At the end, you can applaud for yourself because we did this together. So to invoke poetics is, for me, intervention in the imaginary. And that's a concept which Glissant also handed to me, the imaginary, and he actually only, like in the translator's notice, there is some short description of, okay, what's the imaginary? Okay, that's all the ways a culture has of understanding itself. So for me, when I evoke the imaginary, it's not just thinking things or the figments of our imagination. Imaginary is all the ways that we as a culture have of, when I ask you, what does it mean to be human? You have ideas, okay, this is what it means to be human. When I ask you, what does it mean to be a citizen of a country? You have those ideas. When I ask, what is a country? You say, okay, it's a place with borders, they have their own language. Your answer to all those things, you didn't make that up in your own. You received that from this relational context. So that's the imaginary. And then we have dominant imaginaries, which say, like you as a person, you are a person. You have right to own things. You have right to the freedom of movement. The idea of a personhood, you are you. Your name denotes your identity. You are bordered, like where your skin ends, that's where you stop. That's the imaginary. And what I like of poetics as a method is to intervene in these imaginaries, especially where dominant imaginaries causes harm, violence, or brutality. The imaginaries which rip us apart from each other and into our own confined spaces. And some of these spaces allow for access to privileges and goodness. And some of these spaces are like death zones, as Achille Mbembe called, where you are reduced to a mere living, where exploited for capital, or to be invoked as the other, as the danger, as the barbarian, to see the self as was the opposite of the barbarian? Civilized, yes, thank you. So this is as a foreword to the poetry, and now some poetry. 3 visions of relation. The first vision, time. As the flowers blossom, as the rivers flow, as the gorges deepen in the stream it grows, as the sand created from the pebbles and stones, as the beach receiving the wind as it blows, as the movements of time passes all of us by, dragging us further, forced to comply. With no destination, always astray, time spares none from growth and decay. As the graffiti fades from the walls that it graced, as the rust is forming on the metal and rain, as the battle takes place for patterns to break, as we tend to the wounded, we stand in the wake, as the movements of time is affecting us all that is big and all that is small, all things that breathe and all things that don't, time makes one reap all that is sown. As the trees and the layers it grows in a time of its own, as faraway planets roam in their galactical zones, as quantum physics particles spins in rhythms and glimpses, we speak of polytemporality, together in difference. The second vision, difference. Within the unfolding of the now, we unfold into each other. We crease and read the marks on ourselves and see what we used to be. There was a time where I was. There is a time where I am. Both is still me, but I can never go back. The occasion has passed. I know that I've changed. In some ways, I look like myself, but I'm not the same. If you knew me before, you would tell me I'm right. You touch my face and say I still have that gentle look in my eyes. And as you take from my nose a lash that released, you'll say, you welcome the new. Happy to meet. The displacement of time is not an abstraction at all. It's the infinity of alterations that drags us along. There are no stable points, only the fact that difference arise. To be is to become along the passage of time. The final principle, the third, togetherness. Every time I invoke the I, all sorts of others are implied. There is no self. Clear-cut, well-defined, we is porous being, and that is why. We is multiple. No such things as a group too large. I am exactly because you are. We is together, but never one thing. We is many, with all differences it brings. Imagine yourself worldless, and you wouldn't be. Imagine yourself worldly and see how rich you would feel. Look at everything around. Notice how nothing stands alone. All forms communities by keeping others close. And this closeness is not mere proximity. It's affectedness at best. We don't change arbitrarily. We change through relationships instead. Bless you. The second poem is called Creolization. It's a short one. Communities have no fixed starting point from which they were built. The middle passage does not constitute an absolute rupture. Resonance crosses seas, survives the abyss, and is ever evolving still, expanding, shrinking, coalescing in unpredictable ways with everything that they cross paths with, interlinked being, amalgamated in difference but still expressing some sensible harmony together. Perhaps that's what we have come to call culture. Now comes to the part where I thought when I came in today that, I'm not sure how familiar people are with Fanon, Frans Fanon. It was I'm not sure if they were buddies. Were they buddies? They knew each other. Were they friends? They studied together, but were they? I'm not sure if they were homies. Like, okay, they knew each other definitely. Nah, I'm not sure as well. Doesn't matter even. But so Fanon meant a lot to me, especially in growing up in the Netherlands in a deprived neighborhood. And I had a long time until I was 16. Like my Dutch was very bad, but my parents didn't teach me their native languages. So the only language I spoke was bad Dutch, whatever bad may mean. And then eventually I thought that I started rapping and writing, and it was all in English because I'm like, okay, that's the language of hip hop and that I can relate with. And eventually, some way later, I started at university and I read Fanon. And I read it in Dutch. I found a Dutch version of Black Skin, White Masks. And I read it like poetry. It was so beautiful to have that experience, which he was writing about, which felt very familiar to me, to see that it was possible to express that in Dutch. And that was the moment where I started writing in Dutch. And now it's like all of my livelihood writing in Dutch. And that was like a very defining moment for me. And when I encountered Glissant, for me it was poetic, especially that side of me which resonated to more than anger. And in Fanon, it really reached that anger and the political side. And I think the next piece is a combination of both. This is in Glissant, but I feel, that was the note I tried to make. When I came in, I thought I had moved to create a very Glissantian idea of Fanon, but after some conversation with Assad, I realized I have a very, very Fanonian reading of Glissant. So, yes. It's called Economy of Loss. The living has been reduced to binaries, to categories of either or, reduced to bordered existence with clear-cut lines surrounding them and well-defined edges. The living has been mapped in the great catalog of reality, fitting neatly into their own classes with their own properties and corresponding statuses. They have classified the living: expendable, disposable, a ghastly matter, allowed to be debilitated, killed on sight, forced to be dead in life, relegated to zones of non-being. A geography of exploitation, put to work, made the color of their skin relevant, made their genitals and gender worth, made their bodies into carriers of productive capacities. They have named the living, attributed to them positions, assigned to them a function in their relationship to those who did the naming to them, placing themselves at the top of the food chain as the moral pinnacle of civilization, opposite to those categorized as primitive. They have made their imperial tongue the language of truth, of progress and modernity, placed the throne of the universe in their continent, self-endowed with moral superiority in order to subjugate all that is different. For difference is seen as a threat. They crave understanding, to neutralize us through their totalizing grasp, a quest of making legible, pressing all that they encounter into the same fabric of reality as they have decided reality to be, a force of assimilation. They demand transparency, request integration, a project of homogeneity and sameness to purify a nation, an impossible task, of course, for on the one hand, the other is asked to prove their innocence, their humanity, by declaring a likeness to the colonizer, and on the other hand, the other is made ontologically inferior, not able to transcend their barbarity, and will thus never be included in the annals of being worthy or worthy being. In this matrix of fixed identities, Proximity to the core provides access to privileges, power, capital, freedom of movement, and distance then marks one deplorable, condemned to be the wretched of the earth, to be subaltern, to belong to the oppressed, the marginalized, dispossessed. Man has been reduced to ego, a thinking thing, separated from the outside world. The bridge between has still not been found, but believe me, they have been looking, and looking tirelessly. They have put him in a vat, in a simulation, in the hands of God, tasked him with the burden to be the last resisting force against demonic intervention. Covered in EEG electrodes, one day the secrets of the soul will be secret no more. The computer screen in holy code will show what thought is made of. And I must confess, I fear the conflation of data with living, as if relation can be contained in that funny little box, in models based on sets meant to express what it means to be human, a brain alone in the void of loneliness, with only itself to communicate with. This lonesome life I rebuke, my emotional realm made into secondaries. The authentic self is not merely rational. The merely rational is not simply thinking. My embodied being exudes wisdom. I repeat, my embodied being exudes wisdom. Wisdom from the gutters. Knowledge from my mother and my mother's mother. Softness from my father. Touched by the many loved ones who dare to care for me kindly. And kindness that cannot be replicated in labs. Although I would love to see them try to speak warmth into the subjects they study and to kiss it to life, then, perhaps then, the hidden meaning of being will show itself to them, and they will realize that to be living is to always be more than total. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have they not? Have they not ground us meticulously, refined us to be made into the concrete that holds their system in place? Our mothers' wombs, fracked for shell shards, forming nothing less than looted quarries running dry. Have they not ripped us apart, you and I, atomized us into singular beings, non-relatives, strangers, if you will, where family resemblances occur merely by accident? Have they not milled us, molded, mauled, maimed, minced in the machinery that posits itself as total? No crevice left unaccounted, none unknown, none incomplete. Doubt is merely temporary, they say. Our instruments of science and truth will come for you, eventually. The next poem is called Filiation v. Relation. You crave lineage, you seek descendants, only by blood you will make a brother. Don't know who the father is, but you spent your whole life looking for him. You live on a vertical axis of belonging, from origin to offspring. Inheritance is the only thing that you value. It's an obsession, really, a root that poisons the earth around it so that it can grow alone. A genealogical structure that guarantees legitimacy by tracing one's beginning back to a single source. Be it God in its monotheistic forms, be it the nation as springing forth from a singular soil, be it the idea of reason as it is passed on from the Greeks to the Europeans. Identity is linear, you say, a line you can trace. The clearer the line, the purer its filiation. Impurities, then, are there to be cleansed and excluded. A fascistic violence that the defenders of this totalitarian system willingly take upon themselves to exert. We've seen it. We've seen genocide, witnessed it every second of every day. Palestinian bodies erased from land they made home, told they would never belong. Technologies of death deployed, battle-tested on the ground, and sold in showrooms and to still extract value. 9 different brands of bombs in the aisle is not true difference. 9 different brands of bombs in the aisle is not true difference. It's still subjection to one singular form of living. The violence of the fascists to force all diversity into bordered existence might be most visible with raids picking brown bodies from the streets, putting them in chains, confining them to cages, setting them on trains, concentration camps and gas chambers. They leveled hospitals in the name of the culture of life, refused baby food in the name of the culture of living. Liberal democracy applauded, washed their hands in innocence, pointed at their institutions, called them robust, and asked us to patiently wait for the judges of justice to strike their hammers. But no judgment will pass that will threaten their singular way of organizing the world. Their order is built on the violence of making same, always has been. The exploitation and transplantation on slave ships of crops, kilometers of land filled with one species, dictated by market value, crafted logistical routes, to aid their infrastructure of extraction. The cargo might have changed form, but it's cargo nonetheless. The merchant have changed markets, but it's merchandise nonetheless. The overseer might have changed clothing and weaponry, but its function of protecting empire remains. I am not hopeful. But as they scorch the earth, leveled all difference, expand their realm of living, be it for white bodies or the expansion of capital's access, I must needs speak of relation. Relation as a fugitive escape from it all, an errantry, an imaginary that does not seek belonging through blood ties to a land, but belonging through forging bonds with all that is other. It's the lived expression of connections, being shaped by all that affects us, and in return we leave everything that we touch affected. No such thing as self-enclosed. Each being a breathing node in a breathing network, horizontally branching out from all sides, top and down as a rhizome. Relation is not linear, a move towards completion. It's the ceaseless becoming in the multiple, never being just one. It's the following of redundant trajectories, fleeing the endeavor of artificial ordering, embodying different identities all at once, being the concrete of the now. We are here, the echoes of the past. We were there, and the chaotic spiraling that deterritorializes every attempt of making clear and well-defined. It's the whole world in its non-totalitarian totality that is diverse, that preserves its particulars. It points us towards a unity in difference, a coherence among opaque particulars that are non-reductive to each other. We are a community of people that are never just one. Thank you. I have one final poem. This last poem is a eulogy for two great Martinican thinkers, giants I've called them. So to Frantz Fanon, I have my soul to thank you for. You gave me words at moments I thought I couldn't speak. You gave me the confidence to reach beyond the capabilities of what this society taught me to believe. Fanon, I thank you for teaching me that the psyche is a battlefield where liberation must pass not only through the streets, but through dismantling of our colonized subjectivity, where the body remembers that what politics tries to suppress, where philosophy isn't ridden from comfort, but from the edge where the flesh tears under the weight of the past. I thank you for teaching me that every act of liberation must also be an act of creation, that decolonizing is not simply the end of empire, but the beginning of a new sort of human. You helped me understand why our desire for recognition is never just vanity. It's the longing from a colonized person to be seen as human by a world that invented the category of the human to exclude them from it. Fanon, you taught me that rage and tenderness are not opposites, but companions, the two lungs through which resistance breathes. You showed me that violence in its most profound sense is not destruction, but a reclamation, the refusal to remain a mere object, that to break the chains is also to break free from the order of meanings that hold us captive. I thank you for giving revolt a face, to demand action, to thought, otherwise it's wasted. I thank you for sharpening my moral intuition, knowing when peace is depraved, when politeness is cowardice, and when love must be militant. You made me see that healing without justice is just another way of forgetting it. So I thank you, Fanon. You will be remembered with love and dignity. To Édouard Glissant, I thank you for your guiding light. Phenomenology might have given me the world, but you gave me back a wholesome life. You showed me that relation is not the opposite of solitude. It's the flourishing and flowering of existence as it spirals into continual creation of the new. You taught me that newness doesn't need to come about through violent revolution, a revolution that negates the past as if there's nothing there worth holding on to, as if everything that I have become is a mere product of trauma and repression. You told me that what I do possess is also worthy as is. My language, my slang, the broken Dutch my mother passed on, the words mixed from different languages, the melding pot community of Moroccans, Turks, people from Curaçao, Bonaire, Aruba, Suriname, Serbia, Somalia, Afghanistan, Albania, that our shared living in the margins does not denote a geography of death, but an archipelago of invention together. You showed me that there is justice in opacity, that the demand for clarity is not done in good faith, that the refusal to be understood is not mere defiance, but a way to reclaim selfhood, knowing that the self is never a monograph, but always the implication of others and all that has touched us. We form no lonely islands here. No closed-off continents, no single mass, but a constellation of fragments held together by currents of care. So I thank you for making me question the binary of opposition, where newness is not the synthesis into one, but the cultivation of difference, where we may form counter-imaginaries that allow us to be together without the demand to be the same. You taught me to distrust the seductions of purity of origin, of identity. You taught me that the world is not a tree with a single root piercing from the earth, but rather a mangrove, a rhizome tangled, fluid, intertwined, drinking from many soils at once. You taught me to listen to the stutter, the remix, the echoes, the trembles, the reverbs, the way that poetry imbues with meaning without having to explain. It is being attuned to the world and how it resonates. So I thank you for giving me the space to sit with complexity without forcing it to resolve, for showing me that multiplicity does not need a center to hold, that the world around us can be open like we are and still make sense together. You showed me how the refusal of closure is the embrace of becoming, to foster a faith that difference can exist without hierarchies being enforced on one another. So thank you, Glissant, for teaching me that to live a moral life is not to define others, but honor their intranslatability. Thank you for showing me that poetry is not an ornament to philosophy, but philosophy itself, when reason grows humble enough to step into the realm of sensitization. Glissant, you will be remembered with love and dignity. Thank you. Yeah,